I was not a nice boss at times. I expected performance.
Worst from someone.
Mr. Everhart, custody of the sheriff until this coming Wednesday.
In a world rife with corruption, and where the scales of justice often tip in the favor of the powerful, a seismic shift is underway. The thin line separating those sworn to protect and those consumed by their own predatory desires are blurring, and the consequences are dire. Brace yourself for a harrowing journey into the darkest corners of law enforcement as we expose the shocking truth that has rocked communities and shattered trust. Today, we bring you the stories of several law enforcement officers who, once considered untouchable, now face the harshest of penalties, a life sentence behind bars. These individuals, whose duty was to uphold the law and safeguard their communities, instead succumbed to the temptations of power, exploiting their positions for personal gain and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Their crimes, ranging from drug trafficking and extortion to brutal acts of violence and abuse of authority, have left communities reeling. The echoes of their unlawful activities have resonated far and wide, eroding the faith citizens once had in those entrusted to protect and serve. Join us on this journey as we shine a light on the shadows that plagued the world of law enforcement, exposing the darkest secrets and celebrating the triumphs of those who refuse to let justice become a scarce commodity. David Oliver. David Oliver.
You become the moat that you wrote about in your book.
I was not a nice boss at times. I expected performance.
The former police chief of Brimfield, Ohio, had built a reputation for his conservative views and unwavering support for law enforcement. With a substantial following on Facebook, he used social media as a platform to express his pro-police opinions. However, in 2015, Oliver's image took a severe blow when he faced allegations of sexual harassment and misconduct leveled against him by a female officer within his department, Crystal Casterline. The shocking revelations not only exposed Oliver's abuse of power, but also underscored the importance of holding law enforcement officers accountable for their actions. Casterline's accusations against Oliver were troubling, encompassing acts of physical aggression and intimidation. She claimed that Oliver had punched, pinched, and shoved her, displaying a complete disregard for her well-being. Furthermore, Oliver was accused of utilizing his position of authority and his firearm to intimidate not only Casterline, but also other officers within the department. This abuse of power was a stark reminder that even those in positions of authority can exploit their influence to oppress others. The allegations against Oliver didn't stop at physical abuse and intimidation. He was also accused of stealing money from the police department, a betrayal of trust that further tarnished his reputation. Denying all of the allegations, Oliver chose to plead no contest to the misdemeanor charges brought against him. This legal maneuver allowed him to avoid a trial, but also implied an acknowledgement of guilt. As a result of his plea, Oliver was sentenced to 2 years of probation, serving as a consequence for his actions. In addition to probation, Oliver faced the permanent prohibition of ever serving as a police officer in Ohio again. This out of the misconduct he committed and serves as a clear message that his behaviors was incompatible with responsibilities and values associated with law enforcement. The sentence aims to prevent Oliver from potentially abusing his power in the future and protects the public from any further misconduct that may have resulted from his actions as a police officer. Despite Oliver's legal proceedings and the resulting consequences, Crystal Casterline has taken further action to seek justice for the sexual harassment and misconduct she endured. She filed a lawsuit against Oliver, pursuing accountability and recompense for the harm caused. The case is still pending in court, a testament to Casterline's determination to hold Oliver accountable and shed light on the importance of addressing such abuses within law enforcement. Michael Dotro.
Worst that we could possibly expect from someone in our society.
Michael Dotro had a commendable start to his career as a police officer in the Edison Police Department, New Jersey. Joining the force in 2003, he swiftly ascended the ranks, earning the position of sergeant by 2011. Dotro's dedication and outstanding work were consistently recognized, earning him accolades within the community he served. Unfortunately, his promising trajectory came to an abrupt halt in 2017 when he faced multiple criminal charges. Dotro pleaded guilty to federal charges of attempted obstruction of justice and conspiracy to tamper with witnesses. Acknowledging his wrongdoing, he humbly accepted responsibility for violating both the law and the trust bestowed upon him as a law enforcement officer. In 2019, he received a severe sentence of 20 years in federal prison for his crimes. Despite his guilty plea, Dotro made an appeal to the judge for leniency, highlighting his previously unblemished record and his desire to be a positive influence in the lives of his children. However, the judge remained unmoved by his words, recognizing the gravity of the crimes committed and delivering a stern sentence. Dotro's reaction to the conviction was remarkably restrained. He entered the courtroom donning a green prison jumpsuit, yet his composure remained unshaken. As the judge pronounced the verdict, there was no discernible reaction from Dotro. His demeanor remained unchanged. Throughout the sentencing hearing, he refrained from making any statements or displaying any signs of remorse. Daniel Holtzclaw.
Let me ask the jury, is this your verdict, so say you all? Yes. All right. Counsel, would you like to examine the verdict forms? Mr. Holtzclaw, this jury finds you guilty of the various counts, will be remanded to the custody of the Oklahoma County Sheriff.
Daniel Holtzclaw, a former Oklahoma City police officer, became the center of a disturbing and highly publicized case that shook the nation. In 2015, he was found guilty of numerous heinous crimes, including rape, sexual battery, forcible oral sodomy, and other sexual charges. The gravity of his actions resulted in a staggering prison sentence of 263 years. The charges against Holtzclaw stemmed from a series of sexual assaults that occurred between December 2013 and June 2014. His victims were predominantly poor and marginalized black women, along with a then 17-year-old black girl. Tragically, the vulnerability of these women played a significant role in Holtzclaw's predatory acts. The prosecution argued that he deliberately targeted these individuals, believing their voices would be easily silenced and their stories disregarded. One of the key factors in the prosecution's case was Holtzclaw's abuse of power as a police officer. Leveraging his position, he coerced his victims into silence, exploiting the trust and authority associated with law enforcement. By doing so, he further perpetuated the cycle of victimization and eroded the very foundations of justice. Throughout the trial, Holtzclaw's defense vehemently maintained his innocence. They portrayed the victims as untrustworthy, weaving a narrative of lies and conspiracy. In an attempt to undermine their credibility, the defense highlighted the criminal records of some of the victims, labeling them as unreliable witnesses. However, the jury saw through these tactics and found Holtzclaw guilty on 18 of the 36 charges, handing down the maximum sentence available. The case of Daniel Holtzclaw remains a source of controversy and debate. Some individuals assert that he was wrongfully convicted, claiming that there were inconsistencies in the victims' testimonies or flaws in the evidence presented. On the other hand, there are those who firmly believe that he is indeed a serial rapist who received the appropriate consequences for his abhorrent actions. In 2018, the city of Oklahoma City took steps to acknowledge the wrongdoing and provide some measure of restitution. They settled with 9 of the victims, compensating them with a total of $166,500. Additionally, a woman who accused Holtzclaw of excessive force received a settlement of $25,000. These actions represent an acknowledgement of the suffering endured by the victims and an effort to address the systemic failures that allowed such atrocities to occur. Despite his conviction, Holtzclaw has remained steadfast in proclaiming his innocence. He has pursued several appeals in an attempt to overturn his verdict, hoping to secure his release. Unfortunately for him, all of his appeals thus far have been denied, further affirming the strength of the evidence and the validity of the jury's decision. Marcus Eberhardt.
Mr. Eberhardt, the jury's returned the verdict that has been pronounced in court. I'm going to remand you to the custody of the sheriff until this coming Wednesday. Mr. Weems, you've been on a bond.
Once a trusted police officer responsible for upholding the law, Marcus Eberhardt's life took a tragic turn in 2019. It was during an arrest when he made a fateful decision to use a taser, an action that led to the untimely death of 38-year-old William Marshall. Suddenly, Eberhardt found himself thrust into the heart of a legal battle, facing charges of involuntary manslaughter and misconduct in office. Before this incident, Eberhardt had proudly served as a police officer for several years, with no previous records of misconduct or disciplinary action. However, he had developed a reputation for being relatively aggressive in his approach. On the other hand, Marshall carried the burden of a history of narcotics abuse and nonviolent offenses. As the trial unfolded, a shocking revelation emerged, shedding light on Eberhardt's actions. It became evident that his use of the taser had far exceeded the boundaries set by the departmental policy. The prosecution argued vehemently, claiming that Eberhardt had employed excessive force, ultimately holding him accountable for Marshall's tragic demise. In contrast, the defense maintained that Eberhardt had acted within the bounds of his training, attributing Marshall's death to his narcotics use and underlying health conditions. Then, in February 2022, a momentous verdict resonated through the hushed courtroom. Marcus Eberhardt stood before the jury, the weight of their decision heavy upon him. The verdict was unprecedented in Michigan's history, as Eberhardt became the first police officer to be found guilty of a crime for using a taser. In that defining moment, his fate was sealed. The upcoming sentencing hearing in May 2022 loomed over Eberhardt, casting a dark shadow of potential imprisonment. The maximum sentence of 15 years hung over his head, intensifying the gravity of the situation. As the verdict reverberated through the air, Eberhardt seemed urgent to leave, his reaction subdued. In stark contrast, his lawyer grappled with disappointment, struggling to come to terms with the weight of the outcome. But fate had more in store for Marcus Eberhardt. During the subsequent sentencing hearing, a resolute blow was delivered. The judge, fully aware of the magnitude of the crime, handed down a life sentence to Eberhardt. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the severity of the sentence sunk in.